tonight is the fourth speaker in a series of 5 for the CONVERGE Symposium, which is put on by the College of Communication. Thanks to Associate Dean Rob McLaughlin for his support of the series, and faculty members Julio Reyes for organizing everything from ITS, Hans Meyer from journalism, Eric Williams from the Arts and Studies, and Lauren Black from communication studies. So we're looking forward to one more speaker after this as well, coming in the spring quarter. But tonight we have Rob McLaughlin, who's coming to us from middle of Canada. Rob is editor-in-chief and deputy publisher with Postmedia, and is formerly the director of digital content and strategy at the National Film Board of Canada. While there, the work that he's participated in and organized has won multiple Webby Awards, and we're really excited to have him here tonight to talk about this.
Thank you. All right, so I have prepared about 40 minutes of material, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background to start. So stick with me. I will get to the pictures and the sounds right away. And then, of course, we'll have time for some questions. Is there feedback? You guys hear me okay?
It's a little hot.
It's too hot.
You're a little bit loud, so I can fix that.
1, 2, 3. Hello. How's that? A little bit better? It's better? Thumbs up. All right. All right, so yes, I'm a journalist and a producer, and I've always avoided calling myself a web developer or a programmer or a designer, even when I was actually doing that kind of work, tweaking JavaScript and doing wireframes in Illustrator. And I think that's because in my mind, rightly or wrongly, I've always thought of myself as a storyteller first and foremost. No matter what medium I've worked in, whether that's radio or television or print or film or interactive digital media. And for me, the structural decisions about how to tell a story have always been part of the magic of the story itself. Narrative structure, yes, definitely, but also the choice of what specific technology to use to tell the story. In fact, if you've heard me talk at all today, you've probably picked up on some of my thoughts about the media in general, and I think a lot of us in the media in general today have forgotten about how important technology is to what we do, and whether that's radio, television, film, music, or publishing. All of them involve a creative application of one or more technologies of one kind or another. And with each new technology in all those areas, our opportunities for different kinds of artistic expression should expand and evolve right along with them. So a real world example of that is I have a 7-year-old daughter. She will never know television that she can't pause or rewind. And as makers of video programming, I think we're only just the beginning stages on realizing that fact could or should change how we approach the television products that we're making. Personally, I've always been more interested in factual experiences rather than works of drama or fiction, and I very much like the idea of documentary as defined by John Grierson. I also like Grierson's thinking around technology and story, and it's a long quote there, but even in the 1930s, I think what he was pointing out was that it's not so much the media product that's important today, at least as important are the processes and the intent of the media and the tools that we use to create it. So again, if I'm a storyteller interested in the creative application of technology, the question for me becomes, what does it mean to be a storyteller today in the age of the internet? And how are today's new technologies shaping our creative treatments of actuality, to use Grierson's definition? Like Becky said, for 3 years before recently moving to newspaper, I was at the Film Board, the NFB, and all of the examples I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes here, I produced and put into production while I was there. I feel the need to explain what the Film Board does a little bit if you're trying to imagine how that scenario might work in the US. The Film Board is an agency of the Canadian government that uses public money to create artistic and socially relevant audiovisual content that explores Canada and the world from distinctly Canadian points of view. That's the sort of boilerplate that we use to talk about what the Film Board is. It's been around for just over 70 years. It's well known for its work in documentary and auteur animation. It is, in fact, the largest producer of one-off POV documentaries in the world. And it also has a legacy of these creative and technical firsts in cinema. It did pioneering work around stereoscopic 3D filmmaking, which led to the IMAX technology. It helped develop portable VTR technology, which enabled us to actually physically go to new places and tell new kinds of stories. So the idea that the film board in an organization with the word film in its name would start to explore new kinds of technologies to tell these new kinds of stories and work with all artists of all kinds of backgrounds was a real natural fit for the film board. And of course, today's technologies that they're willing to explore are not just changing the way we create and changing the way we distribute content, they're also changing how we connect with each other through that content. To put it a different way, today's technologies are changing how our audiences interact with one another through that content. Interactive is a very big word with lots and lots of baggage, and it's not perfect in describing the work that I'm just going to show you in a few short seconds here, but in many ways we think it's a better fit than words like multimedia or cross-media or transmedia. The term for us meant people interacting with the media, with the creators of the media, or interacting as the audience with each other. I do believe at a personal level that a click of a mouse or the swipe of a finger or the wave of a motion controller changes how audiences can come to understand a story, a point of view, or an issue. I even think it can change how people come to understand themselves and understand each other. So that was the brief intro, and then we'll get to the sizzle here in a second. So it'll take about 40 minutes, and the examples I'll show you are all interactive projects, like I said, that were produced in the last 24 months, working with a range of creators from across Canada. And at the core of them is the storyteller, working with new kinds of tools and attempting to raise questions about how we live our lives and how we live with each other. And to start is a very small piece from an artist in Winnipeg, Alicia Smith.
One new message.
So the subhead was an exploration of changing technology and what gets lost along the way. Alicia paired flea market photos with postings from Craigslist from people who lost their mobile phones. Each of the postings was a plea for the return of the device, not because of the phone itself, but because of the pictures that were on the phone. First pictures of newborn babies, pets no longer around, the last images of a father at his funeral. And as an artist and a storyteller, she's asking us to think about what it means for us to have our collective memories stored on these expendable plastic devices, memories that we've in the past risked fire and flood to save. I like the creative choices that she made here, the human hand holding the photo, the nondescript Craigslist font, the soundtrack mixed with a cell phone pocket call, again, all trying to reinforce the story. The handwriting is from her 82-year-old neighbor, so I thought for a small piece, she put it all together. How do we explore the stuff that matters today in what journalism we call the issues of the day? The reality is that today a lot of that exploration is better suited to an interactive medium rather than a newspaper article or a film or a television program. Waterlife is one such example. It was launched in 2009. It was developed around a film project the NFB was co-producing with a film director named Kevin McMahon. We thought we could help achieve the educational and awareness goals of the project by creatively hitchhiking on the visuals and music and research that went into the making of the film for over 5 years. And in this case that I'm going to show you, we weren't looking to produce something that was meant to be added value to a film or something for people who are already watching the film or just watched the film. This wasn't an extension of the experience. It was intended to be something for audiences who would never see the film at all. And we were looking to create something that could stand on its own from a creative and educational standpoint. If you haven't seen it, I'll just show you this navigational sample here. It's a big site with lots to explore.
The shoreline of the Great Lakes runs through Canada and the United States for 17,000 kilometers, or 10,000 miles. It wraps 20% of the planet's fresh water. Upstream is the St. Lawrence River, and it's fed, in turn, by the 5 Great Lakes. They pour through the heart of North America and the lives of 35 million lucky people who have plenty to drink in a thirsty world.
We're here at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, and we're studying the beluga whales. This is a very threatened population. They might be the most contaminated marine mammals on the planet. A quarter of the adults are dying of cancer.
It's been within the last 5 or 6 years that it's really become a well-known thing around here. The invasion of the Asian carp, and it's a infestation now, actually.
We found testicular deformities in terms of intersex or ovaries within the testicles of male frogs. Between 50 and 70% of male frogs had testicular deformity.
So Waterlife has won, it was launched in 2009, like I said, has won tons of awards, but not so much important are the awards are the kinds of things it's being recognized for. Some call it cross-platform, like I said. It's won top educational awards, marketing awards, journalism awards, activism awards. And it's interesting as a creator that it's hard to define in some ways, but the one thing I think everyone agrees on is that it shows the creative potential of interactive sort of filmmaking approaches here. We all know audiences now have, again, a new relationship with content they control in ways we didn't think possible. And in some cases, simply allowing the audience to choose a camera angle can change your perception of a subject. And in this next case, I think it changes the perception of a creator.
Valsalvas. Some will not when by themselves. Some will not when speaking to children or animals. Some will not when they sing. What is the utterance? Phonemes flounder briquette warmth, tethered to 7 mollusks, and osteoblast chomps into the burger of kelp's wreck, and osteoclast nibbles a puffin's scapula in mid-afternoon wait. Each webbed foot tussles the soft hum of slipper on hardwood floors. On my way to kayaking lessons, when I was about 15, I was increasingly more nervous about uttering my name to the kayaking instructor. I remember sitting in the back of my parents' car. I would try to get a particular rhythm of a song into my head and practice it in my mouth, like Jordan, Jordan. If I sing, right, or if I hum before speech, it really calms the stutter. It reduces it to a level where I can often communicate without social awkwardness. I finally got to the pool. I can see the kayaking instructor and all of the rest of the kids going up to her and sort of very fluently saying their names, very envious of this. I approached her, and she was quite a lot older than me in a really gorgeous red swimsuit. The din of noise in the pool was all kind of clattering around in my head, so I was forgetting the actual rhythm and of the song to hum out my words. And I look up at her and she said, "What's your name? What are you here for?" And I said, and that was it. And she started to look at me with sympathy, which is always what I can't deal with it, makes it worse for me. We just stood locked with each other, with my jaw stumbling back and forth, until finally I reached over, grabbed her pen, and just checked my name. What is the utterance?
So in Flub and Utter, the audience is responsible for the view of the performance. We wanted the user to consider their own reaction to Jordan's work, both as an audience member looking at the performer, focusing on his mouth, and as Jordan, the performer, looking out into the audience and seeing their reaction to his work. And of course, it's got all the documentary elements embedded in the script there in order for the audience to have a way to understand how the words in the poem relate to his life and to his art. Sometimes simple forms, I think, can be the most effective storytelling through some digital mediums, and the goal might not be so much an exploration, but more of a conversation starter, like this next stop motion piece by Andrea Dorfman that traces what it takes to fall in love and build self-esteem.
I was in Halifax on vacation. That's where I met him. I was told he was the nicest guy in the world, but I didn't like him. He was a plastic surgeon, and I thought plastic surgery made people feel flawed. Most of his practice was reconstructive, even life-saving surgery. Still, somehow I managed to focus on the little bit that was cosmetic, and I wrote him off. But then we started to get to know each other, and I discovered it was true. He really was the nicest guy in the world. I decided that we needed something to keep us going across the long distance. I suggested we send homemade postcards back and forth to each other. The first postcard I sent was about what I did that day. A few days later, I got his postcard in the mail. It showed where he removed skin cancer off different parts of patients' bodies and then grafted and patched and sewed the skin up again. Our days were pretty different.
So like the postcards in Flawed, today's technologies connect us across geography, of course. So what does it mean that we now have more in common with someone living on the other side of the country than, or on the other side of the world for that matter, than someone living right next door? This is a very small piece, again, by an artist named Danny Singer, who's exploring this new kind of geography.
Released after the market closed yesterday, the report showed a further decline in weekly crop ratings for the U.S. The report now has U.S. soybean crop rated at 47%, good to excellent. That's a decline of 1% from the week prior. This helped push the soybean values higher as traders were actually looking for a rate of unchanged to 1 to 2% improvement. So with that, November beans closed at 482 3/4, up 12 1/4. And that was after reaching a new weekly high of 486 3/4. That strength was also related back into other soy products.
So Danny Singer's photography is about access and understanding of a place and time most of us only hear about conceptually, Main Street, as a counterpoint to Wall Street, or in Canada it's Bay Street, not as a real place in small town Saskatchewan. His work explores the commercial reality of these places, and because the prints in their physical form are printed at 6 feet high, they're hard to distribute, so he was very excited for someone to put a little bit of effort to have his work distributed in this simple form. This is where I live, by the way.
I desperately wanted to go north and not just see it all for myself, but photograph it, capture it somehow before it vanishes. I knew that every year a convoy of military snowmobiles traces a line across Canada's high Arctic, the theory being, if you don't patrol by land, it's difficult to say it's yours. Now, I'm not exactly a poster child for the Army. But I made a deal with the Canadian Rangers. If they took me along on one of their 2,000-kilometer treks from Resolute to Ellesmere Island, I'd use my cameras to tell the tale of how and why they do it. After a crash course on snowmobile riding and mechanics and much skeptical resistance, I thought I was ready.
This land, we build it as a photographic adventure through a land of snow and ice. The navigation allows the user to explore the story by day, by hours of daylight, or by temperature. You can listen to her personal experiences while you flip through her hundreds of photos and video clips. You can simply read the story if you like, or take it with you on your iPhone or iPad. It's got maps, it's got bios of the team. It's sort of like everything you would expect from this kind of story. And I think we call it classic personal storytelling for an interactive environment. From the personal to the public, how does our idea of what a story is change when the audience is actually part of the process, when the story involves people who want to share or contribute? Again, we are able to see ourselves now in our media more than ever. And I think that's the case in this next piece, where we become unwitting subjects in a science experiment by one of Canada's most famous scientists.
Design the cities that we live in, the kinds of houses we live in, the market, the economy, currency, how many trees we're going to cut, how many fish we're going to catch. Those things human beings can manage and control because we create them and do them. But some things are facts of life we have to live with. The speed of light, gravity, entropy, the first and second laws of thermodynamics. Those are things that we have to accept and work ourselves around. And there is another one that is absolutely crucial. It's a mathematical reality called exponential growth. If something is growing at 1% a year, it'll double in 70 years. 2% a year, it'll double in 35 years. 3% a year in 24 years. 4%, 17 and a half years. Anything growing exponentially will double in a predictable length of time. Now I'm going to show you why all of this stuff about we got to keep growing, keep the economy growing, we've got to keep everything growing is ultimately suicidal.
So I'll just pause it here because sometimes when I present it, people kind of miss it. But what's happening is these are all tweets and they all contain the phrase take a break, which is of course the answer to the question we were asked at the beginning. So if anyone was tweeting while they were kind of listening to this or enough already, let's take a break, we'd be pulling you live into the test tube.
I'm going to give you a system analogous to the planet, and that's a test tube full of food for bacteria. So the test tube and food is the planet, and the bacteria are us. Now I'm going to introduce one bacterial cell in, and it's going to divide every minute. That's exponential growth. So at time 0 at the beginning, there's one cell. 1 minute, there are 2. 2 minutes, there are 4. 3 minutes, there are 8. 4 minutes, 16. That's exponential growth. And at 60 minutes, the test tube is completely packed with bacteria and there's no food left. So we have a 60-minute growth cycle. When is the test tube only half full? Well, of course, the answer is at 59 minutes. Even though it's been chugging along for 59 minutes, it's only half full, but 1 minute later, it'll be completely filled. So that means at 58 minutes, it's 25% full. 57 minutes, it's 12.5% full. At 55 minutes of a 60-minute cycle, it's 3% full. At 55 minutes, one of the bacteria says, hey guys, I've been thinking, we got a problem. We got a population problem. The other bacteria would say, Jack, what the hell have you been smoking, man? 97% of the test tube's empty and we've been around for 55 minutes. And they'd be 5 minutes away from filling it. So say bacteria are no smarter than humans. At 59 minutes, they go, oh my God, Jack was right. We got 1 minute left. What are we gonna do? Well, don't give any money to those economists that are saying we got to keep growing all the time. Give it to those scientists. So they massively inject money into the scientific community. And guess what? In less than a minute, those bacterial scientists invent 3 new test tubes full of food. That'd be like us finding 3 more planets that we could use. What happens? At 60 minutes, the first test tube's full. 61 minutes, the second's full. 62 minutes, all 4 are full. By quadrupling the amount of food and space, we buy 2 extra minutes. Our home is the biosphere. It's fixed and finite. It can't grow. And we've got to learn to live within that finite world. Every scientist I've talked to agrees with me. We've already passed the 59th minute.
It's a bit depressing, but fun. Again, we called it an interactive parable, and it's one of Suzuki's favorite analogies about consumption and unfettered growth. Again, it pulls live data from Twitter based on what you answer the question. If you had an extra minute right now, what would you do? It then takes that data, populates the test tube with people from Twitter doing what you said you would do. It also visualizes the responses entered into the site for another layer of meaning about again, the things we do and the things we consume. That's the responses. And in the end, the story demonstrates that despite our belief that we're all unique and special, we're not alone in the choices that we make, that we're all connected, and it's up to us to figure out the best way to live in what he calls the test tube. Personal stories told across personal technologies. This next piece, a short trailer for it, explores the challenges and failings of instant communication in the context of war.
When my brother and I were growing up, we'd spend our summers at a cottage in Nova Scotia. I think he was about 10 when he started asking for a BB gun. And he just begged and begged my parents until they finally gave him one. So we went down the next summer and found that the cottage was just overrun with squirrels. One afternoon, my mom sort of said, yeah, of course, go out, shoot squirrels. Obviously never expecting him to get one. But he did.
When I think about G.I. Joe, I think about my brother running around our yard when we were kids. We'd play in piles of leaves. He'd be wearing his plastic army helmet. And he'd be pretending to shoot me with a twig. He's always wanted to be a G.I. Joe. And now he is. My brother is way more adventurous than I am, and I'm envious. He's popped down to West Point for a football game, and he's gone to Thailand and Cyprus. And I guess, I obviously can't forget Afghanistan. Unless my brother has an undiagnosed issue with his gag reflex, I'm pretty sure he has what amounts to a mental block when it comes to swallowing any type of pill. I've seen him crush them and mix them into other things just to try to get them down. I've tried to coach him through it, but generally I just end up making fun of him about it. But I have to admit, it was pretty jarring when I saw his army kit getting packed, and there was a bottle of children's vitamins in the mix. Do you have a minute? I just really need somebody to talk to right now.
So Soldier Brother is told to us through a single narrator, Caitlin Jones, but with 3 distinct voices. The public voice performed in audio like a traditional radio narrative. The semi-private voice documented in the real text and Facebook exchanges between Caitlin and her brother in Afghanistan. And then there's this private voice, which you haven't seen, but you can get a sense of what would happen. Which interrupts the story as Caitlin would start texting you direct messages about her frustrations with this kind of storytelling. So in a sense, the story overall explores not only the loss that Caitlin's experiencing, symbolized in the objects that are disappearing on the screen and you can't repeat them once you've click through them, it's also highlighting those frustrations that she's feeling about trying to stay connected to her brother and the limitations of that technology as a sort of, you know, storytelling medium in itself. The next project, I think hopefully some of you have seen as well, we call it a book/documentary put together by the former creative directors at Adbusters magazine. The story is what happens when you lose your job, when everyone you know loses their job, when your entire town is out of work, and then it's completely dismantled and the entire town disappears and the name is even removed from the map. And I'll just play a short sample from that. It's called Welcome to Pine Point.
Mouse click. Tab 579. Click. Mouse click. Backspace 10.
Pine Point was the first place I ever went alone. I was 9, living in Yellowknife, and went there for a hockey tournament. I don't remember much. The 45-minute plane ride, those giant propellers, the rink's blue lobby, and that's about it. This isn't the plane. My team's not on it. But it is Pine Point, around the time I was there. My family left the North when I was 10. We moved to Regina, and I became that kid who got A's and F's. The guy who didn't look forward to the day things would change. My name is Mike Simons. One night last year, I went online to see what had become of Pine Point. Turns out, Pine Point isn't there anymore. Really? The website I found was called Pine Point Revisited. This is what it looks like. Plenty of images of people and enormous trucks, big holes in the ground. It was a mining town. This isn't Facebook. The photos have scratches, wrinkles, and dust. They reminded me of my own family album. My dad died in 1999. And when I try to picture him, I don't see him. I see photos of him. Though I had only stayed a short while in the actual town of Pine Point, I spent hours going through its memorial. The site was the least disingenuous thing I had seen in a long time. Looking in, it's hard not to think that it was a great time to be alive and up north, in a time before seatbelts and sunscreen, when you could still pull block-long wheelies without fear of consequence. The pictures are impossibly friendly. Even the colors and textures seem unself-conscious. Wood paneling, perms, velour, deep shag. The mine closed in 1987. Most industry towns, after losing their purpose, attempt resurrections, or just slowly wither away. In Pine Point, they decided to erase the town from the face of the earth. By the following year, almost everything had been hauled away, buried, or burned. Even the arena where they held their winter carnivals, home to my last little flickering memory, gone as though it never was. This place was planned in some other place. Pine Point had none of the organic growth of most towns, where things morph to fit trends and tides of people. Instead, it was Economics 101. A, build a town. B, fill it with things that towns need. And C, let the people in. If you mounted a social experiment on the creation of hometown memories, it would probably look something like the town of Pine Point, isolated in an unforgiving landscape and built with a singular purpose. In the end, it was left standing just long enough for a single generation to run through it.
Cougar.
My name is Kimberly Fedorov. I lived in Pine Point from 75 to 84.
Kim Castle had a job at the mine, but that's not what she's remembered for. Kim was the latest hairstyle, the newest dance moves, the eyeshadow and attitude of a wider world. She didn't need to know that Pine Point would one day shut down to know that she wasn't there to stay. In the meantime, though, even the smallest town needs some glamour.
Egyptian costume for a while.
athletic, a bully.
I like to get to the music video before I stop, but Pine Point, if you haven't seen it all, it's a wonderful, emotional story with some real characters, as you can see. And I think we tried to explore some opportunities for print artists and publishing in the digital space here. It also won a Webby Award last year for Best Documentary and in the net art category, so they liked the art direction here. And the last example we talked about earlier too, if you were with me at all today, which just premiered at the Sundance Film Festival this last month. It's called Bear 71.
That snare had a breaking strength of 2 tons. The dart was full of something called Telazol, brought to you by Pfizer, the same people who make Zoloft and Viagra. The next thing I know, I'm wearing a VHF collar and I have my own radio frequency. They also gave me a number. Bear 71. Banff National Park in the heart of the Canadian Rockies. Bears and humans here live closer together than any other place on Earth. That explains the radio collar constantly beeping my location to some ranger playing God. There are 15 remote sensing cameras in my home range, plus infrared counters and barbed wire snags to collect my hair. I call it the grid. I live around a town called Canmore in the Bow River Valley. Now Canmore has doubled in size over the past decade and it gets 5 million tourists a year. It's not like I can tiptoe around it at all. I need 500 square kilometers just to find enough food to raise my cubs. People come to Banff to see what's been lost almost everywhere else. Everyone wants to see a grizzly bear, but of course, no one wants to be killed by one. There used to be this beautiful patch of bright red buffalo berries right in the campground by the firewood pile. Bear 66 and I used to sneak there. You know, when you're young and you push boundaries. The first 6 months after I got the radio collar, I was chased away by rangers 12 times. They call it aversive conditioning. I call it rubber bullets. Even at a distance of 100 feet, a rubber slug is still moving at 650 kilometers an hour. The rangers know where I am from the day I leave my den in the spring to the day I go back to sleep in the fall. I suppose it's like most of the surveillance that goes on today. It's partly there to protect you, and partly to protect everybody else from you.
So the story is told through thousands of images and video clips captured by motion-censored cameras placed around a national park just outside of Calgary. I think it's a surprisingly emotional story with some strong technical features that allow you, for example, to explore that virtual terrain called the grid, and you actually see other people who are navigating the site at the same time you are if you activate your camera. So check it out if you have time. I won't spoil the end for you. It does take 20 minutes to get through. And if you have seen it, I'd love to hear comments on it because it's pretty new still. That's it for the examples anyways. A range of approaches, interactive video, photo-based nonlinear narratives, audio-driven web documentaries, data visualizations, a range of subjects from personal reflections on body image and disability to commentaries on technology, the economy, the issues of the environment and the sovereignty of the North. A range of scale and scope. Some of them were designed to attract a user's attention for only a few minutes. Some of them will take you an hour or more to get through everything. Budgets for these projects range from about $1,500 to around $120,000. And all of them, I think, still relied on the vision of a storyteller working collaboratively with a team, again, making the most of today's technology for some kind of creative expression. So that's the end of the presentation. Thanks. So questions, I think, if anyone has any.
How do you guys handle idea generation? Does someone come to you with an idea with only slightly bit of work on it, and then you help them bring it all the way to completion? Especially with larger projects like Pine Point, that's a lot of stuff to gather and a lot of work to do.
Yeah, Mike and Paul, the goggles guys, they came to us with this story, kind of loosely formed, and it was pretty much, the pitch was like, Rob, I just was online and saw that the town I first visited as a kid is no longer there. We were thinking, and they found the website made by Richard, who has all of the assets, and they said they were thinking of making a book, maybe it should be a film, and I said, well, I have access to financing for a digital project, you want to do that? They've never really done one in this way before, so we worked with them. Other ones, like the bear one, the filmmaker said, I have access to the images, what do we do? And then it took 2 years to figure that one out. And then at other times, because of the film board, they're a producer, they're able to say, we should do something on X, Y, or Z. So, you know, nuclear armament and disarmament is something that we've been working on for, well, since I got there, and still not done. And we're trying to find people who will buy in and carry the vision forward for us. So it's a little bit of both at the film board, yeah.
On these projects, about how many people kind of actually help produce them? Is it
Well,
like 120, 10, 3?
The little ones, it's like one person usually, and the bigger ones, the team, the team wouldn't get more than 15 or 20 people. And even in the credits, if you look at the credits, some of them are just standard boilerplate credits, like the production coordinator who simply, moves the contracts through the system. But as far as the creative teams, it has usually more than one and usually less than 6 or 5 core people, I would say. Yeah.
For instance, Bear, how long was your production time? How large was the staff or your team?
How big was the team?
How big was the team and how long was your production? How many months did it take?
From the idea when Leanne said, Rob, we have access to this database of video and images, years, probably 2 years.
How about to where you really, you had your storyline and you started
Well, it didn't really work that way, to be honest. It was sort of like, what do we want to, if you've heard me say, it was like, what are we doing again, and what do we want to build, and what piece do we need to tackle now, and even the idea that the voice of the bear, as an omniscient bear that knows everything about everything, was a discussion that happened. And then it's like, who's going to write the script? And the first person who said, you want to write the script, wrote the script, and it didn't work at all. So that took a little bit of money. So that was in development for a really long time. And then it kind of came out of development, and we triggered the production phase. And that phase was fairly quick. I would say 6 months or so, probably, for that. But it was a really small team. It was Leanne and Jeremy, and then Locke, and the scriptwriter wrote the script and then was done. And then we hired Mia Kirshner to do the narration, and that was a morning. So some of it happens really quick, but the team never gets all together in a room and says, let's go make this thing. It never really happens that way. Yeah. Like in all the other ones, like the test tube one, I don't know if I've ever met the guys that actually did the programming for that. They live in Nelson, BC, and they snowboard all the time and make websites on the side. And so
you took over a newspaper now?
Yeah, 2.
So what's happening there? What are you trying to do there now?
With this, what I've learned here?
Yeah.
Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit today, so sorry if you've heard this before, but for me, it's about the intent of the media in the first place. Like it is about the reaction in the audience. So I think the newspapers that I'm leading, I'm trying to instill the sense that they are connected to their communities and connected to their audience, and the creative and journalistic decisions we make every day should reinforce that and should advance that relationship somehow. So that's exactly what we did here. Also at the newspaper, much like at the film board when I went, there was no system. There was nothing. They were like, we make films, how are we going to make anything else? Same sort of thing at the newspaper where they need to evolve and change. So my job is an agent of change. It's a provider of vision. It's an enabler, right? To enable the staff to move forward. Doesn't matter if it's film, radio, television, whatever. That work needs to happen. So that's part of my responsibility. Am I going to get to make these kind of things? I think so. The most dangerous place to live in Canada is a town called North Battleford, Saskatchewan. And it's this lovely little town or whatever, but the statistics show crime is just crazy there, and you're going to get hurt there more than, and so I'm like, that's a story we need to tell, right? So we could send a reporter who would write 3,000 words, and we take pictures and print it in the paper. But I think I'm interested in that story enough to try to turn it into something bigger and involve the community and explore that a little bit more. And because I'm good at managing costs and have been at least good at managing costs of things, I think I can do that on a newspaper budget.
Would you say that most of your content creators have experience in web development as well? Because you have to kind of have a vision to be able to create the content to run something that large.
Yeah, well, lots of them don't. It's a team. It's always a team. So some of them on the team have never done what they've done before. Leanne in the Bear Project had never made anything before other than 2 films. So she has none. And then the team that we build around the holder of the vision has different skill sets, right? So, so the answer is not everyone has the same skills, and it's not necessarily web development. We need good developers though. And and on these teams there was always someone who knew how to write code, yeah. Sorry, I'm having a hard time.
How do you generate an audience for these type of great projects you produce other than film festivals or contests?
Yeah, well, we fail at this all the time. If you're a maker of media, I'll probably ask you who it's for. If you came to pitch me, one of the first questions I'm like, who are you making this for? And if you say yourself, then it's not going to go very far. But if you have an idea of the person that you'd like to engage in the discussion, exploration, conversation starter, however you call it, that'll give us a sense of who you're trying to get at. And I mean more than just 18 to 25-year-old males or something like that. Really, these are social issue-based kinds of stories. So, so you usually have a pretty good sense, and then you would formulate your strategy afterwards. I think it's a mistake to say, I'm going to make a film and then figure out how to get people to see it.
You said you worked on projects for up to 2 years. Do
projects while you're still finishing one, or you just one after the other?
Yeah, no, we had 60 projects in various stages of development and production at one point. Yeah, all kind of inching their way forward, trying to find a point where you have to make a decision about how to continue.
Long-time viewer, first-time caller.
Okay.
If I take you out into the weeds on the story where you're running the snowmobile across the outlands of Canada, there are two things that always bothered me about it, and I have a chance to ask.
Okay, good, yeah.
One of them is this wonderful dialogue in the words that the woman has written, delivered by an actress rather than the person who actually did that.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit about the ethics and the decision of that, and then coupled with that, the rather over-dramatic music.
Yeah, well, the music is throat singing, and it's a fit with the region, whether or not it's perfect or not. This land story is really an interesting story, I think, in some respects. Diane is a journalist by training who went and shot everything and came back to the film board and said, I want to make a film. And they worked, and it was there when I got there. So I showed up, and it's in the Vancouver office where I was. And she was in the editing, and everyone's and all the producers are going, I don't know if we can make this into a film. Because there's no story, there's not enough material to work from, despite the fact that she had all these thousands of photographs. Never made a film before either. So in the end, as a way to kind of help her get her story out there, we thought we could do something fairly rudimentary with it in the digital space. So it took next to no dollars to create. So it's very inexpensive to put this together. And we added it to our suite of products that were helping our management and executives understand what we were talking about when you can create different kinds of products. So it was an early one. If you met Diane, you would know why she's not the narrator. Her character doesn't allow it to come through, and we tried and tried and tried. And I think we tried because, not just because ethically we think it made more sense, I think it's because it's her story and you kind of want to hear her, right? So in the end, if we believed that it had to have an audio narrator, there was no other way to do it. And in the end, is that an ethical kind of issue that I would be concerned about? No, because I don't think we're trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. I think our ethics remain intact because we're saying this is narrated by someone else. So I'm comfortable with that. If we didn't put that up front, I think I would have a problem with that. Again, I think This Land is what it is. It's a slideshow with audio. And we filled it out around a bunch of other stuff. And it was put together really quickly once we stopped trying to figure out how to turn something into something that it couldn't be, right? So, yeah.
So what fraction of these interactive projects do you embark on and abandon partway through as this just isn't going to work?
Yeah, it's what is the development to production ratio at the Film Board for films? I think it's 2 to 1. So for every one project we have, maybe actually 3. It's probably closer to 3 to 1 on the film side. On the interactive sides, they die a slow and long and painful death. They do. If you, as the person, if the team members assigned to it can't get it to the place to get it to the next stage where you need to invest a bit more money or time into it, it's probably going to sit there for a long time. Like I said, I was there for 3 years, and there's lots of projects that I started that are still on the books. And in some ways, if you take that approach, you don't actually have to kill it, right? It can kind of just sit, and if it ever comes to life, it comes to life. We still have equity. There's still the assets there. The auteur animation that we won, we had an Oscar nomination for this last year, Wildlife, took 8 years to make. And not because they worked on it for 8 years, but because that's just the timeline of those things, right? So.
How many of your projects are 100% funded when they start?
What do you mean funded?
Have the financial backing, like you have the cash and the resources.
All of these projects were produced and financed by the Film Board, so 100%.
From day one?
All of these ones, okay. Yeah. We have done co-productions, will do co-productions, they are doing co-productions. But the beauty of the Film Board, and that's why I want to make sure I laid that out at the beginning, very special, unique organization. We're not a funder, we're a producer, so we will finance it right through to the end. So if you can keep the project going through the stages we set it up, you're going to have the financing. The creators in this don't need to go raise other financing. Although Mike just phoned me today and is having a hard time financing his second project. So I'm trying to help him. That's the creator from Pine Point. He's saying he has this great story, and I believe it is a great story, but he's having a problem finding financing outside of the film board, even with Pine Point under his belt as something that's won awards and reached hundreds of thousands of people. And, yeah, the financing is really tricky. We haven't talked about it that much today. No one's really brought it up that much. But.
Do you have to be Canadian to
Work with the, you do, yeah. Yeah, sorry. No, it's a great institution, yeah.
Have you all come up with a way to monetize this?
We're trying, they are trying to, we were trying to. I think there's promise for it. I think you're not going to finance all of it depending on your costs, right, maybe, but the financing structure for film and television in Canada is a complex and crazy system. And you can get things financed through some broadcast channels. You're going to make any money as a business and owner of a production company doing that? I don't know too many people that do. Yeah, usually they're agencies and they do development work on the side and then do passion projects like this. So, but we have distributed them to other broadcasters, like Test Tube. We sold rights to it to SBS in Australia, so they put it on their website. So there is some distribution, but to be honest, it's more token than anything, I think.
Where do you find the teams of people that you work with?
Pardon me?
Where do you find the teams of people that you work with?
Through their other work, usually other websites or recommendations or pitches and things. The guys who I approached to do Waterlife, I went to three companies just because I really liked what they were doing, and they had no idea about the film board, who I was, anything. And so, yeah, their past work is how we usually find people if we're soliciting them, or if they come to us, it's a different story. But yeah, I mean, you just try to keep up, right? It's a country of 30 million people, so it's maybe not quite as big as the pool of people you have to pull from here, and maybe that makes it a bit easier to spot talent in some ways. But yeah.
Is that a shock to them for you to come in and say, I have this thing that I want to...
I think so too, because yeah, it was as developers, as creators of things for agencies. They were a production house more than anything, but they were really good at what they did. I think they viewed that paper vision, right? It was breaking and people hadn't seen it before and they wanted to get some experience in it. I said, great, we'll do it if you kind of live by my rules about why we're making this in the first place. And they were really good at pushing back then. They'd never done a story before. They didn't understand any of that stuff or why we would care about what it says on the screen and things. So Waterlife was a good first project to do with them. And I think Jam 3 is the company, and they've done lots now, and I think they've grown because of it. So that sense that they're allowed to innovate was big for them, and learn and try new technologies and stuff. So yeah, they were great to work with. And I hope the other ones too, the guys from Vacuum Sucks who did the Test Tube, I think, were great as well. And yeah, filmmakers, as some of you might know, like, I think it's a privilege to get to make one film with the film board. And in some ways, I hope there's this sense that the work you get to do with the film board, the pain of putting up with the bureaucracy and having to work with a aged government agency or whatever is worth it, because you get to do things that you might not get to do for a client somewhere else.
So how do you all rate success?
It's a good point, right? Like for the how do you judge the success of Flub and Udder, right? Partly it is trying to engage an audience in an issue that they might not think about otherwise. Part of it is recognition from peers, right? It is important, if you're not out for monetary success, that people who have some standing in the community say this is pretty good work. So that's important to us. But again, I think the most important thing is that it engages an audience. So I think metrics about just who's seen it and whether people are finding it interesting or talking about it, especially around these kind of stories, are really important. Yeah. So audience.
How do you develop your audience for the project?
How do we develop the?
How do you market or reach to the audience? Is the idea creator come to you with the audience in mind, or do they just have the idea and do you help them find the audience and hone that in?
I think it's hard for creators sometimes to wrap their head around thinking about the audience. So we, as a programming, like as someone with a broadcast background too, that's what I think about when I make decisions about what to put on air or what to put in my paper. So I think we deliver that. I wish creators thought more about the audience, and I've said that at least 12 or 13 times today, I think, at some point. Like, I do think you'll be a better creator if you think about the person more that you're creating it for. I think your products will be more amazing with that. But to be honest, lots of people don't have that chance to develop that expertise. So usually we help them, like, you know, sort of plan out how to reach the people they want to talk to. Are we good at it? Maybe not, but at least we're trying, right? To think like that. So they're trying. I'm still trying in newspapers.
So are you using social media? How are you pushing this out? So you have a piece, go to a film, South by Southwest.
You know, the South by the festival stuff is, South by Southwest is good. There's lots of people there, but I think if it's a website or if it's a mobile phone, I'm going to try to reach people on their websites through where they're at the devices. I think the going to festivals and stuff is good for marketing. To be honest, it's not a place to reach an audience. It's a marketing tool, right? Or a business tool as well. But so yeah, social, whatever. I mean, whatever method we can use, electronic or print or otherwise, we'll do it. But again, if you're reaching them through a website, you know, you have to get them there to the website. So usually that involves some social media thing, yeah.
Do you have any setup for internships for students, or do you work with students, anything like that, or is it all professionals working?
There isn't an internship program, no, not at the Film Board, and because of our guild agreement stuff, we would have to contract them to do work like we would anyone. So there aren't any internships.
How about
yet.
the newspaper?
Newspapers, we do internships, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if anyone wants to come to Canada to hang out, just let me know. It's far away, it's a bit of a...
Is there a place where all of your projects are archived?
All of these ones, yeah, they're all online and accessible at interactive.nfb.ca. Yeah.
Where do you see the most promising future with newspapers and print?
With newspapers? I think most newspapers, well, again, you know, I have to speak about Canada, and it is a different story, so I'll qualify that. I think the pressure that newspapers are under in the States is much more pronounced than what's happening in Canada. Right now, there is the same pressures for those for the business of newspapers in Canada, but I think it's a little bit different here. I don't know what the future of newspapers is the short answer, and I don't know how well we'll be able to evolve the business to meet what I believe is still a really strong demand for news and information and understanding about the things that are happening in the world. I don't think that's going away. The challenge of the newspaper business, as I see it, is how do we make the business make sense, given that the print advertising model seems to be a bit wobbly, right? But I do think as the same people that could work in newspapers, I believe can work in a range of different media doing very similar jobs to what they're doing now. No?
Well, I was just wondering, like, what kind of projects you're working on with the newspapers?
Oh, what projects do I work at the newspaper?
Well, like with collaborating with the newspaper and everything, in order for this future that you see.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Did I answer your question or even come close? No. Okay.
You had mentioned when you're working with people, if they're willing to play by your rules.
Yeah. Yeah, the Film Board does have it's a pretty articulated mandate, right? It is public dollars, so, you know, there are some ideas of what's a fit with the Film Board. Those rules are sort of flexible, absolutely, right? Like, we won't do pure comedy just to make people laugh for a form of entertainment. We're not gonna do that, right? Because there's other places to do that. The language at the Film Board is it operates on the edges of or around market failure. So the idea partly is if you can get your project made any other way, maybe the Film Board isn't the place for you, right? So we should be producing things that are hard to finance in other ways. So that's part of that thinking, right? So it needs to fit with socially relevant kind of piece too, that's hard to define, so it's a bit soft on that stuff, but those would be the things that I meant. Yeah.
I have a question, technology question. For instance, building out the grid, if you were building it out right now, what technologies would you be creating that in?
Like, would we use Flash or HTML5
Yeah,
or something?
right.
You know what, the grid, I think, you know, you guys can go see it for yourself. I don't think it turned out the way it should have or could have, and I think partly that's a technology challenge. And I don't think Flash is inappropriate there, and I think it's a good cost-effective tool to use, and it's fast, and you don't have to constantly make compromises about how it would work or not. But I think a grid on that website is a bit of a challenge to use. I'm not sure it's a technology challenge as much of a user experience challenge and a fit with the story kind of challenge, to be honest. Yeah.
So you would probably still reach for Flash, though, in terms of the affordability and the range.
I might take it out. Yeah. Like, I might actually suggest, depending on time or whatever, I'm not sure it's needed. I'm not sure. I think there could be another way to demonstrate the fact that as you move through the site, you're tagged and numbered and monitored and tracked, and as you bump into people, things happen and you can see them. I'm not sure it needs to be as literal as what I see there. And to click through something to kind of let me know that I'm tagged and numbered and tracked, like the bear, that I can follow the bear around to reveal the story, that as I click my camera over and I see all these other people staring at the thing, and if I wave, they wave back, that we're all sort of watching each other watch this thing. I'm not sure it needs to be as detailed. Like, I think broader strokes and more sort of impressional interface would have worked a little bit better. So, but again, the timelines are interesting, right? Because why we're there, because it had to launch at Sundance. So that was why it launched when it did, I think. But I think it's wonderful, but I'm a harsh critic.
You're a harsh critic. But, you know, you're just opening new doors, so we're just starting to understand.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. All right.
That's another question. Right.
Thank you.